Welcome to Brainish English Stories.
One time in Siberia, I was walking in the woods in the evening. As I walked back, I saw a young Russian girl crying near some trees. She looked pretty, so I went closer. She did not see me and kept crying. I stopped and looked at her. She had black hair, arranged in the way that girls in Siberia wear. Her hair was very dark, which looked beautiful against her light skin. When she noticed me, she quickly got up, wiped her tears, and said to me, "Please forgive me, sir, but I am very sad. I wish I could help you feel better," I said. "I don't expect to feel better," she replied. "There is nothing you can do to help me." "But why are you crying?" I asked. She did not answer, but she kept sobbing. I could see she was very sad. "Did you do something wrong?" I asked. "Is your father angry with you?" "Yes, he is angry with me," she said. "But is it my fault if I cannot love his friend Afanasy?" Now I felt even more interested. Like Chateaubriand says, this story was about love and tears. I wanted to hear more. I asked the young Siberian girl, "Who is this Afanasy that you cannot love?" She calmed down a bit. She started to talk and told her story very well. She said that last summer, a Basker family traveled further north than usual. Baskers came to the village to buy things and sell yellow gowns called dubas, which they make from the birch tree bark. Her father, Michael, was a shopkeeper, and they started doing business with the Basker family. The two families got closer when they learned they were both from the same religious group. The head of the Basker family was Afanasy. He soon fell in love with Daria, the young girl, and asked her father if he could marry her. But Afanasy looked rough, and Daria did not like him. She said no to him. Her father, Michael, loved her and did not force her to marry Afanasy, even though it would be good for his business. The Basker family left to go back to their own country in August to gather their hemp and rye crops. But winter passed, and when June came, Afanasy returned. He brought many goods: rich gowns, Chinese belts, caftans, and over 500 horses. He came with much wealth and again asked for Daria's hand in marriage. Michael was impressed by all the things Afanasy brought, but Daria was very upset because her father was thinking about this marriage again. She disliked Afanasy even more than last year. I listened to her story with care. I felt sorry for her, and she trusted me with her feelings. When she left, she was less sad than before. The next day, I went back to the place where I had seen her, and I found her again. She smiled when she saw me. Afanasy had not come that morning. Daria had come back, maybe thinking I would return. She wanted to ask what she should say to her father and Afanasy. I gave her my advice and felt very interested in helping her. That evening, I went to buy something from Michael, her father. I spoke nicely to him about his good judgment and knowledge. I wanted to become friends with him. For several days, I went to the same place, and I almost always found Daria there, as if we planned to meet. She looked more and more sad each time. When she saw me, she asked for more advice. She trusted me and I felt very close to her. Seeing her and feeling sad for her situation made me feel something special. It had been a long time since I had talked to a young and beautiful woman. For many months, I had only heard the rough voices of officers, soldiers, and workers. All of this made me feel different and moved. When I saw Daria, I remembered my first love, and these memories made Daria seem even more beautiful. One day, she said to me, "You saw Afanasy this morning at my father's shop. Don't you think he looks rough, ugly, and unkind?" "Yes," I replied. "Well, I will show you who I like more than him." She smiled as she said this, and I felt very moved, thinking she was going to say, "You are the one." Then she moved back the gauze veil on her head. Suddenly, at a signal, a young man jumped out from behind the trees and called to me, "Thank you, Frenchman, for your good advice. I am Wasily, Daria's friend." I was very surprised. I was hoping for love, but now I saw I was just a friend to her. I felt embarrassed, but Daria quickly made me feel better. She said, "Wasily, whom I never told you about, is my friend. I wanted you to meet him, but he was jealous because you were comforting me, and I wanted him to stay hidden so he could see that you are kind. Wasily will like you as I do. Stranger, please keep giving us your advice." Daria's words calmed me, and I felt happy. Even though I was far from my home country, in an enemy land, I was glad to help two people who needed it. Wasily was handsome and friendly. He was also rich, but Afanasy was much richer. Daria's father, Michael, used to like Wasily as a match for Daria, but now he rejected Wasily because Afanasy was wealthier. We made a plan to try to stop the marriage with Afanasy. I talked to Michael many times and tried to solve the problem, but it didn't work. Then came the feast of St. John, the patron saint of Tkornea. People from all the nearby villages came to celebrate. Early in the morning on the holiday, all the villagers put on their best clothes and got into small, narrow boats. Each boat was made from a single tree, like the canoes of the South Sea Islanders. A man sat in the middle with one oar and paddled on one side and then the other to make the boat go fast. These small boats moved in a line, raced each other, and did different turns on the lake. The weather was usually beautiful at this time of year. The day ended with dancing and eating outside. The lake of Tkornea, which was usually a quiet place, became full of life, and it looked very lovely. Wasily prepared several boats with musicians, who played music that everyone enjoyed. Soon, most of the small boats followed Wasily's boats, just like in Venice, where gondolas follow musicians who sing at night. Wasily knew that Michael, Daria's father, would be happy to hear about his popularity. But Afanasy also came to the festival. When he heard that everyone was following Wasily's boats and talking about him, he got 20 of his best horses and covered them with rich cloth. When the fun on the lake was over, he started races on the shore with Tartar music playing. This was new and exciting to see in the summer, and people liked it a lot. His victory was complete, And in Tornea, everyone talked for days about the races on the shore. Afanassy's power over Michael became even stronger. Daria's sadness made her father think that she was meeting Wasily in secret, so he kept her at home. Now, I only saw Wasily, but his talks were not as enjoyable as Daria's. Near the end of July, he told me that Afanasy had asked again to marry her. Daria's father, seeing her sadness, agreed to wait until next summer. He told Afanasy he needed more time to prepare her dowry, the gifts a bride brings to her marriage. But in truth, he wanted Daria to have time to accept the idea of marrying the Basker. Around this time, Wasily had to leave. Demidov's manager sent him with a group of workers to the Ural Mountains to cut down trees and make charcoal. He wouldn't come back until mid-September. During this time, I saw Daria almost every day. She didn't look as bright as before, but her beauty seemed to have grown, as she looked so sad and thoughtful. Little by little, I earned the trust of Michael, and I helped Daria as much as I could to lift her sadness. I was a foreigner and a prisoner, so I wasn't a threat. I had enough money, so Michael didn't worry about me and showed me kindness whenever he could. In mid-August, I saw a strong sign of Michael's trust. He invited me to a family celebration that usually only women attend. This festival was for gathering cabbages, and it was like their harvest time. On the day a family gathers their cabbages, which they salt and keep for winter, the women invite their female friends and neighbors to help. The older women give the signal to start. In the evening, everyone sits down for supper. Among all the young girls, Daria always seemed the most charming to me. She danced when her mother asked her to. Her movements showed she was happy, but her eyes, almost full of tears, looked toward me. The only person who really knew her true situation. She was surrounded by people who called themselves her friends, but they did not understand her feelings. Near the end of September, Wasily came back from the woods. Now, Daria had many months before Afanasy might return, if he came back at all. She felt free to love Wasily without worrying too much about the future. At this time, 2 Russian officers came to Tornea with some soldiers who looked more like Cossacks than regular soldiers. When people saw them, they knew it was a sad day. They had come to recruit soldiers. On the set day, everyone was in the square, but it was clear from their faces that they did not want to be there. All the women stood on one side, watching with worry, and some of them were crying. I was there too, watching everything. The officers put the men in 2 rows and walked along slowly, looking at each one. Sometimes they would touch a man on the shoulder, and he would be taken to a small group in the middle of the square. When they finished the 2 rows, they inspected the men who had been chosen, making them walk and take off their shirts to check their health. Just like the recruiting councils we had in France for many years. After checking a man, he could go if he was not chosen. Then the crowd would cheer with joy. But if he was selected for service, he was put in chains right there, in front of his family, who cried in despair. This man was fit for the army. To finish this sad story, I need to add a few more details. Wasily, as I said before, was at the inspection. The recruiting officer looked at him carefully and decided that he would be a good soldier in the army. When Wasily's family heard this, they were very sad. For a Russian soldier, 20 years in the army was like a lifetime. He could never come home. Daria was heartbroken. She was so sad. She almost became sick. She only got a little stronger when it was time for Wasily and the other recruits to leave. On that day, the officers gave the recruits lots of meat and brandy to drink until they were almost drunk. Then they put the recruits into sledges, still in chains, and took them away. It was a heartbreaking scene. Families cried as they said goodbye, singing prayers for the dead, even though the men were still alive. The young men, drunk and not fully aware, sometimes laughed or shouted back at their families. But Wasily did not drink. He was clear-headed. He held out his arms toward Daria, his friends, and me, saying goodbye with many tears. Daria ran to him and hugged him tightly before the sledge left. But as soon as he was out of her reach, she fell backward onto the ice. Nobody helped her. They were all busy following the sledges. I lifted her up and took her home to her father. There, she got the care she needed. After about a month, she was able to go back to her usual activities, but she was never the same. Winter came again. I often saw Daria at her father's house, or when she went outside to meet me. Her father allowed these meetings, hoping they would cheer her up. But Daria had changed so much since Wasily left. When we rode together on the lake in sledges, she told me many sad things. Her words were full of sorrow, and she even believed in superstitions. I tried to make her feel better, but I realized everything around us reminded her of her sadness. The lonely, wild land made her feel even worse. At home, she was calmer but very sad. Her face had lost its happy expression, and she looked tired and weak. These meetings did not help her, so I tried to avoid them. She understood. "Go, kind Frenchman," she said. "You are trying to help me, but Wasily took my life with him. My heart cannot come back, just as he cannot." I continued to see her sometimes. Old Michael was unhappy because Daria cried whenever she heard the name of Afanasy. Michael wanted Afanasy as his son-in-law because Afanasy was wealthy. Michael started to prepare in secret for a wedding, buying fine silks and ordering a beautiful crown for Daria. She guessed what he was doing and once said to me, "My father is making a lovely crown for me. It's for my last time in church. He should hurry because Daria won't make him wait long." In the middle of June, Afanasy returned, more in love and eager than ever. But as soon as he arrived, Daria became very ill. A strong fever came over her, and in just a few days she was close to death. Nothing could help her, and she died saying Wasily's name. I was very sad. I went to her funeral at the church in Nizhny Tagil. Daria was dressed in her best clothes, and her face was uncovered in the coffin. Family, friends, and people from the church were there. Men stood on one side and women on the other. After a hymn in the local language, the priest gave a final speech about Daria. His gray hair, long beard, and tears made the moment very serious. When he finished, everyone went up, one by one, to say goodbye and kiss Daria's hand. I went last, took her hand that I had held many times before, and gave it one final kiss.